What is this? Could it be a human? What I saw when I visited my parents' house after a long time was shocking. It was a skeleton lying in the yard. This skeleton was clearly not from any wild animal. It was unmistakably human. Lying on its back with its feet towards me, it reminded me of a skeletal model I had seen in elementary school. Chills ran all over my body, and I felt nauseous. But when I looked at the skeleton again, I realized something. No way! Could it be my father-in-law? The skeleton was in tatters, but clothes were still clinging to it. And the pattern matched the work clothes I had gifted my father-in-law. Afterward, I called the police, and the area was in uproar for a while. However, at night, I discovered a shocking fact from my father-in-law's diary. No way! But if that's true, then Trembling, I muttered to myself and at the same time resolved to uncover the truth. My name is Rachel Miller. I am a 33-year-old. I grew up in New York. Actually, my father passed away from illness when I was in my early 20s. I was deeply saddened when I lost my father, who was kind and hardworking. But I made an effort not to worry my father in heaven and managed to get a job at the company I hoped for. After working for a few years, my job was fulfilling and rewarding, but being somewhat shy, I hadn't managed to find a romantic partner. I was considering finding a partner when my father's brother, who had always doted on me since I was a child, Uncle Travis, spoke to me. Rachel, if you're okay with it, would you like to meet one of my subordinates sometime? When I was surprised, my uncle said, I was asked by your dad to take care of Rachel. He's a proud subordinate of mine, good-natured and competent at his job. How about just meeting him? I couldn't refuse my uncle's invitation and responded, if I'm okay with it. My uncle was a manager at a major corporation, and his subordinate would certainly be considered an elite. I was nervous about meeting such a person, but I was also a bit excited. After some time, we arranged to meet face-to-face. Set up by my uncle, we had the chance to meet alone in a restaurant. Nice to meet you, I'm Aaron Miller. You must be Rachel, right? The man who approached me was tall, impeccably dressed in a suit, and handsome. Yes. I'm Rachel. Nice to meet you. Afterward, Aaron and I decided to have dinner together. At first, the atmosphere was a bit awkward, but Aaron listened attentively to my stories, and by the end, we were both smiling more. We exchanged contact information and even made plans to meet again. On one of our dates, Aaron confessed his feelings to me. Rachel, would you consider a serious relationship with me, with marriage in mind? I really like you. You're kind and have a calming presence. I quietly responded. I'm flattered. But is it because my uncle is your boss? Aaron looked surprised. Not at all. Sure, our meeting was through the director, but now, as a person and a man, I'm drawn to you. Would you consider dating me? At that moment, Aaron looked unsure of himself, and I reassured him. I'm happy, Aaron. And that's how Aaron and I started dating. He was always kind to me during our relationship, and I found myself increasingly attracted to him. I was even certain he was the only one I could ever marry. After dating for about a year and a half without any issues, Aaron proposed on my birthday. Of course, I joyfully accepted, and we were officially engaged. After getting my mother's blessing, we went to greet the uncle who had introduced us, and he said with a smile, You two are getting married, huh? I'm glad my introduction worked out. Please take good care of my dear niece. Aaron straightened up and replied with a firm yes, while I watched the scene with a smile. Later, we went to Aaron's family home to formally announce our engagement. Aaron's family home was located deep in the mountains of a distant county. My mom left when I was little, and she has a new family now, so we don't keep in touch. It's just my dad living there now. On the way to his family home, Aaron explained this to me. We originally lived in town, but Dad wanted to pursue pottery and bought a house deep in the mountains. He's kind of a stubborn old man now and doesn't really mingle with the neighbors. I hope you'll like him, Rachel. Though Aaron sounded worried, I smiled and reassured him, it's going to be fine, though I felt a bit anxious myself. Aaron's car continued deeper into the mountains, and I was surprised since I usually didn't go to such places. Eventually, we stopped in front of a large, old farmhouse. Rachel, this is my family home. Nervously, I followed Aaron inside. We were greeted by a man in work clothes with a gruff expression. Dad, this is my fiancée, Rachel. Rachel, this is my father, Michael. Aaron introduced us. Nice to meet you, I'm Michael, Aaron's father. Thank you for coming all the way to this remote place. I hastily introduced myself and handed over a gift. As Aaron expressed his desire to marry me, my father-in-law stared intently at me. Are you sure about Aaron, Rachel? I was momentarily taken aback by his words. Aaron was both handsome and capable, a true elite. Everyone said he was beyond reproach. Perhaps this kind of statement was just a parent's modesty. Aaron is kind and promising, and really more than I deserve. Upon hearing this, my father-in-law slowly nodded. Then, I also approve of the marriage. Please take good care of my son. Relieved, I sipped the coffee he had offered and then commented. This mug is wonderful. It fits so well in the hand, and the color is lovely. At that, the stern look on my father-in-law's face softened momentarily. I made it myself. Would you like to take a look at my workshop? Having been interested in pottery, I was delighted to take him up on his offer. The pottery my father-in-law made was truly impressive without any flattery, and I was amazed. He even had a website to showcase his pottery and received orders from customers. As I asked questions enthusiastically, my father-in-law answered with a beaming smile. I felt that my so-called stubborn father-in-law was actually a warm person. Well, Dad, it's time to go. We have plans afterward. My father-in-law saw us off. He is wonderful, I said in the car on the way home, and Aaron gave a wry smile. I find him tough and a bit difficult, but I'm glad you liked him. With that, Aaron drove us back towards the city for about 2 hours. We had plans to meet some of Aaron's friends next. He was going to introduce me to his friends from his student days. When we arrived at the promised pub, about 7 of Aaron's friends were already gathered. I thought to myself, oh. Because one of them was a woman. She had light brown hair, a feminine appearance, and frankly, she was beautiful. These are my closest friends from high school. I introduced myself. Then the woman with light brown hair came over and said, Nice to meet you, Lillian. Rachel, I'm looking forward to getting to know you. Taken aback by her forwardness as she linked arms with me, Aaron said with a wry smile. Lillian, don't be too familiar. Rachel, this is Lillian, a classmate from high school. I said, nice to meet you, and Lillian turned to Aaron. Aaron, it's been a while. How's your dad? It seemed Lillian was also acquainted with Aaron's father. After that, we were surrounded by Aaron's other male friends and began to eat, but I was distracted by Lillian, who stuck close to Aaron's side. Aaron and Lillian were chatting amicably, mostly about high school memories, and there didn't seem to be anything particularly suspicious. Eventually, the evening ended without incident, and Aaron and I returned to New York. Not long after, Aaron and I registered our marriage. We had a wedding ceremony and began living together. At our wedding, my father-in-law gave us a pair of mug cups that he had made himself. I happily accepted the gift, saying, I'll cherish it. At that time, I exchanged contact information with my father-in-law, and we began to keep in touch occasionally. I was worried about my father-in-law living alone, but Aaron didn't seem too concerned, making me wonder if this was just a typical father-son relationship. Whenever I messaged, "How are you?" he would reply, though briefly. When I commented on his work, he would even send me his new pieces. After we got married and started living together, Aaron often wanted to return to his hometown. I just want to see my friends back home. It's fine if I go alone. Why don't you relax at your parents' place? He would say this and go back about twice a month, staying overnight. Aaron was still a great husband who helped around the house and treated me well, but his frequent trips back home started to bother me. Sometimes I would go with him, but I'd be left at his parents' house because I want to drink with just my guy friends. During those times, I would cook for my father-in-law and chat with him. Aaron would stay overnight in a hotel because he had been drinking and would pick me up the next day from his parents' house. I found it difficult to ask Aaron to cut back on his trips home. I didn't want to feel like I was tying him down. Gradually, I reduced how often I went with him, eventually only accompanying him once every 3 months to visit my father-in-law. However, I believe my relationship with my father-in-law was good. I even gave him a new work uniform for Father's Day, and he was always concerned about my health. Then, one summer day in the second year of our marriage, Aaron went home alone, and when he returned, he locked himself in the bathroom immediately. From inside, I could hear him retching. "What's wrong, Aaron? Are you feeling sick?" I asked, worried, and when he came out, his face was pale, and he said, "Maybe I ate something bad. Don't worry about me, Rachel." About 2 weeks later, Aaron came home from work and told me, "I've decided to accept the company's offer for a 1-year assignment in Kentucky." Shocked by the sudden news, I asked if I should come with him, but he said, "You have your job, Rachel. It's better if I go alone. I'd like you to look after the house." Though I felt lonely, I nodded. Aaron promised to come home often, and since I wanted to continue my work, I was somewhat relieved. Thus, Aaron and I began living apart for a while. It was lonely living alone, but Aaron frequently called me on video. In Kentucky, Aaron lived alone in a condo rented by his company, but I wasn't worried because he was capable of handling household tasks. Once, I visited Aaron's place in Kentucky. "Hey, Aaron, did you change your hobbies?" I asked as I entered. He looked surprised. "Since when did you like floral-scented aroma diffusers? And the curtains, you always liked brown or beige, but these are bright orange." The aroma was a gift from a coworker. And the curtains were just something I bought on sale. Nothing special, really? I believed Aaron's words at that time. Back then, I didn't have a driver's license, so I couldn't visit my father-in-law after Aaron was assigned alone. Instead, I had been sending messages, but the replies weren't coming quickly. "Aaron, I've tried contacting your dad, but he hasn't responded. Do you think something might have happened?" I asked during a video call one day and Aaron replied, "Dad said he's busy with his pottery work. I guess he'll get back to you eventually." At first, I didn't worry too much because Aaron said so. However, I became increasingly concerned as there were no updates on my father-in-law's website. Since Aaron had been assigned elsewhere, I had some time for myself and had been attending driving school. When I finally got my license, I decided to visit my father-in-law. I tried to call Aaron to tell him, but he didn't answer, perhaps busy with work. Since Aaron had taken the car to his assignment, I traveled by train to his hometown, then rented a car to go to his family home. I bought some gifts for my father-in-law and got into the rental car. It was the end of winter, and the warm air from the car's heater felt comforting. I wondered if my sudden visit would be a nuisance, but decided that seeing his face would be enough. With these thoughts, I drove on. By evening, I finally arrived at the quiet family home, where only the sound of birds could be heard. I rang the doorbell, but my father-in-law didn't come out. "Hey, it's Rachel. Are you there?" I called from outside the entrance. Still no answer. Wondering if he was out, I tried the door and it slid open. The inside was silent and smelled dusty. My father-in-law likes cleanliness, so the house should have been clean, but it felt like no one had lived there for months. I hesitated to enter uninvited. Maybe he's in the workshop. The workshop was accessible through the garden. I walked from the entrance around to the garden side, heading towards the workshop. As I turned the corner to head to the garden, something unbelievable caught my eye, and I gasped. Then, in the next moment, I screamed. It felt as if the scream wasn't even mine. Cold sweat broke out all over, and my entire body felt like it was on edge. "What is this? Could it be a human?" What I saw was a skeleton lying in the garden. It was a skeleton lying in the garden. It was about 10 feet away from me. I couldn't bring myself to get any closer, and I stood there covering my mouth, staring in shock. The skeleton was clearly not from any wild animal. It was unmistakably human. Lying on its back with its feet facing me, it reminded me of a skeletal model I had seen in elementary school. Chills ran all over my body, and I felt nauseous. There was no foul smell, but I couldn't accept the bizarre scene before me. But when I looked at the skeleton again, I noticed something shocking.
No way! Could it be my father-in-law?
The skeleton was tattered, but clothes clung to it. And the pattern matched the work clothes I had gifted my father-in-law. The moment I realized this, I couldn't hold back any longer and vomited in a corner of the garden.
Right, I need to call the police.
I ran back towards the entrance and, with trembling hands, pulled out my phone to make the call. "Is this regarding a crime or an accident?" the operator asked, and I replied in a strained voice.
It's a crime. I came to visit my father-in-law and found him like this.
I then locked myself in the car and waited for the police to arrive, shaking. I tried calling Aaron several times during this, but he didn't answer. Soon, a police officer from the nearby station arrived. After seeing the scene in the garden, he immediately called for backup from the main station. Hours later, a large number of officers arrived and began examining the scene, causing quite a stir. I was questioned in detail by the police but could only respond, "I just came to visit after a long time and found it like this." As night fell, my father-in-law was taken away. When the police were leaving, they mentioned they would investigate it as both an accident and a crime. How could this have happened to my father-in-law? A station officer replied. "We can't be sure yet. We need to investigate further. There seems to be damage to the skull. There was a large ladder nearby, so he might have fallen from it, or it might have unfortunately hit him on the head." Indeed, I recalled seeing a ladder fallen in the garden. My father-in-law had mentioned that the house sometimes leaked, so he might have been fixing the roof. When the police had left, I finally received a call back from Aaron. "What's going on, Rachel? You've called so many times." Shaking, I recounted everything to Aaron, who sounded genuinely shaken.
My dad, really?
Aaron's voice was indeed trembling. He seemed very disturbed. Aaron said he would come back home to New York immediately, and I decided to leave as well. But just as I was about to leave the family home, I felt as if someone was calling me from behind. Was something calling me? By what? Tentatively, I entered the family home again. Dazed, I walked towards my father-in-law's room. I can't explain why I did it. It felt as if something was instructing me to. Entering my father-in-law's room for the first time, it was dusty, and I inadvertently coughed. Then, I noticed a notebook on the desk. The moment I picked it up, the sensation of being called disappeared. Startled, I clutched the notebook and fled from my father-in-law's house as if escaping. I intended to return home to New York, but there were no trains left, so I hastily checked into a hotel near the station. Even after taking a shower, I felt a disturbing palpitation and couldn't eat anything. Trying to sleep was futile. The scene kept replaying in my mind, preventing any rest. Sitting on the bed, I opened the notebook I had brought from my father-in-law's house. It turned out to be his diary. His meticulous handwriting filled the pages. "Today, Aaron introduced me to a woman he wants to marry, Rachel. She seemed earnest and intelligent, and I had a good impression of her." That's what was written about the day we first met. Tears involuntarily came to my eyes. Most of the diary entries were about his daily life and pottery, but Aaron and I also appeared occasionally. "Today Rachel visited. Aaron seems to have gone out drinking with friends again. I worry he might be making her feel lonely. However, the stew Rachel made was delicious. Today, she gave me a new work uniform for Father's Day. I liked the pattern. It's been a while since someone celebrated Father's Day for me, and I felt happy." Tears streamed down my face as I read my father-in-law's words. But as I continued to read, I came across a passage that made me quicken my pace through the diary, reading it to the end.
No, can it be? But if that's true, then
Trembling, I murmured and clutched the diary to my chest, ready to face the truth. The next day, I returned to our home in New York. After a while, Aaron came home. He couldn't find a flight and had driven through the night.
Rachel, you must be shocked. I still can't accept it as reality,
Aaron said, looking pale. Later, we were called by the local police and questioned. It seemed my father-in-law had died around the summer. Because his house was isolated in the mountains and he had little interaction with neighbors, his death went unnoticed for a while. Aaron testified, the last time I saw him at the beginning of summer, he was in good health. I answered as I had been asked the day before. I hadn't seen him for months, and he stopped replying to my messages around the summer. Ultimately, the cause of my father-in-law's death was undetermined due to the decomposition, but it was speculated to be a tragic accident with the latter. After settling down a bit, Aaron and I held a small family funeral for my father-in-law and returned to our daily lives. 2 months after finding my father-in-law, Aaron took some time off from his assignment and came home. Since the incident, we hadn't talked much, and it was a rare face-to-face meeting. On the second night of Aaron's return, I prepared serving coffee in the mugs that my father-in-law had given us.
Hey, should we stop using these bowls? It feels like bad luck,
Aaron said, looking uneasy, but he finished his meal when I remained silent.
Thank you, it was delicious. What's on your mind, Rachel? You seem deep in thought.
Served him coffee after dinner and said, let's talk.
You look so serious.
I laid out several photos in front of Aaron. In the photo was a woman frequently entering and exiting Aaron's condo at his assignment location.
This is your friend from back home, Lillian, right?
Can you explain this? The color drained from Aaron's face as he stammered, How do you have this?
I've been suspicious of you. So, I asked my uncle to help me investigate your actions at your assignment. Why is Lillian coming in and out of your house?
Aaron looked away, his voice shaking as he explained.
That's because I heard Lillian was coming to visit as a tourist, so we just met up briefly. I swear, there's nothing more to it.
I sighed.
I also spoke to your friends back home. They said Lillian moved away around the same time you were assigned here. Essentially, she's been almost living with you for the past 2 months, right? To think you'd brazenly carry on an affair at your assignment.
Aaron was lost for words.
How did you find out?
I pulled out my father-in-law's diary.
This is your father's diary. Let me read it to you. Today, when I went to town, I saw Aaron and his ex-girlfriend Lillian holding hands. It seems they may still be involved. I'm conflicted about whether to tell Rachel.
As I read from the diary, Aaron's face grew increasingly pale.
Your father realized there was something between you and Lillian. His last entry reads, Tomorrow, I've called Aaron to talk. I intend to convince him to end things with Lillian and be honest with Rachel. If he pretends not to know, I'll have no choice but to tell her.
I stared directly at Aaron.
Aaron, you were with him on the day your father died, weren't you?
Raising his voice, Aaron denied it.
No. When I last saw him, my father was well. His death was purely accidental.
I simply said, okay, and then pulled out a voice recorder from the table.
This was planted in your car the day after your father was found. I checked what was recorded last night.
Aaron's mouth fell open. I pressed play on the recorder.
It was tough, man. The police questioning was intense. Glad it seems to be going down as an accident, though.
Then Lillian's voice followed.
But it worked out, right? They don't know Aaron did it. I really hated that old man, you know? He tried to end things between us that day, so annoying.
Yeah, exactly.
When I played dumb, he threatened to tell Rachel. Things got heated, and I ended up hitting him with a hammer nearby. Then he stopped moving. But you gotta praise my quick thinking for knocking over that ladder.
Lillian laughed, wow, classic Aaron. Good thinking.
If her uncle, my boss, finds out, it could mess up my career. But if getting rid of one stubborn old man secures my safety, it's a small price. And I want to keep seeing you after you come all the way to Kentucky for me. Yeah. After you got married, I realized it had to be you, Aaron. I'm glad you accepted my feelings after the wedding. It sucks that you have a wife, but you truly love me, right?
I stopped the recorder there. Aaron trembled violently, his face turning purple.
So, you were responsible for your father's death?
Aaron immediately apologized.
Rachel, please! Don't tell the police about this.
He clung to my feet as I remained silent.
Look, I'll admit to the affair and apologize. I'll break it off with Lillian. Just please, keep this quiet. It's already been handled as an accident.
His eyes were bloodshot. He continued to shake my shoulder, pleading.
It'll be bad for you too if your husband is found out as the culprit. Please, Rachel, take this to the grave with you.
That's when I finally spoke.
No, I will never forgive you.
Aaron's eyes widened in shock. What?
It's infuriating that you pretended to be a good husband while you were cheating. But what I cannot forgive, above all, is that you murdered a kind man, my father-in-law. I've decided to avenge his death.
At that moment, Aaron's face turned bright red, and he began to scream furiously.
You ungrateful wretch! Killing that old man doesn't make any difference. My career as an elite is what matters. I never loved you. I married you for my career, and now you repay my kindness with betrayal.
So this was Aaron's true nature. Strangely, I wasn't disappointed. He must have lost his temper like this when he killed his father too. Suddenly, Aaron's hand reached for my throat.
If you think about making this public, I'll kill you too.
I dodged and ran out to the front door. Aaron chased after me.
Stop it!
At the end of the hallway of the building, the police I had called were already there. Aaron continued to scream as he was restrained. Finally, I told Aaron.
I will never forgive you, either will my father-in-law. We are getting a divorce. You better quietly accept your punishment.
Aaron was handcuffed and taken away. Later, based on the evidence I submitted, Aaron had no escape and confessed to the police. He was found guilty, of course, and went to prison. Lillian, who had conspired to cover up the facts, was also punished. I hired a lawyer and proceeded with the divorce from Aaron. Although he initially resisted, he eventually agreed to the divorce. The case made the news, and Aaron was obviously fired from the major corporation he worked for. My uncle said,
I'm so sorry for introducing you to such a terrible man. I really regret it.
I reassured him.
It's not your fault. It's all his doing, don't worry about it.
Although Lillian was released from prison relatively early, she was shunned by family, relatives, and friends and moved to a distant place. I heard she's working in a nightclub. As for Aaron, he is still in prison. Shunned by fellow inmates, with no one visiting him. I once received a letter from him, but I tore it up without reading. He will spend a long time behind bars. And even when he gets out, there will be no one to help him. I want nothing to do with him ever again. Meanwhile, soon after Aaron was arrested, I moved out of the condo we shared and went back to my childhood home. My mother, knowing everything, comforted me, saying, "You've been through a lot," and I couldn't help but cry in her arms. Since the news of Aaron's crime spread to my workplace, I resigned from my job. My uncle helped me find a new job. At this place, nobody knows about the incident, so I've been able to work in peace. I sometimes reread my father-in-law's diary.
Today, I finished a new set of dishes. I made them in the color Rachel said she liked. I wonder if she'll be pleased when I give them to her. Rachel is a good daughter-in-law. She's honest and kind. That's why I want Aaron to cherish her. I hope my wishes reach my son. I want Rachel to always be happy.
Each time I read my father-in-law's wishes and thoughts, it tightens my chest. When everything settled down, I visited my father-in-law's grave alone.
I have avenged your grievance. Please rest in peace.
I murmured this. Under the blue sky, a gentle breeze caressed my cheek.